we're going to make sure we have the right data in there. So up here, this is just where you input the name of the series. It's already called GPS, so that's fine. The X values are the horizontal distance, and so let's go ahead and check that we have the right ones for that. So you click on this button right here, and it's taken us to this tab. Since our elevation profile is titled, the first chart we're trying to make is the supply side, let's go to the supply data, and the axis that we're entering is the x-axis. It's the horizontal distance. So let's enter the cumulative horizontal distance right here. So all the way from 0 to 178. When you're done with that, you press enter, and come down here. This is the y values. If you look on this chart, the y values we're looking for is the elevation. So let's go back to you click on this little button, go to our supply data, and then highlight your elevation here. It's really important that you highlight the same number of cells here, all the way from 12 to 20, that you do when you do the horizontal distance, so they can have the same number. Press enter, press OK, and we'll see what it gave us. Alright, so we want to make sure that we can see our whole series on this graph. So to ensure that we can see this whole thing, it looks like we're going from 40 all the way to 100 or to 200. So let's go to our data to check if that's appropriate for the horizontal distance. So it looks like on our data we're going from 0 to 180. So our elevation profile, we're missing 0 to 40. So let's go ahead and edit this axis. In order to do that, you click on the axis, and then you right click and you say Format Axis. Once in there, you can set your minimums, your bounds. So you can set your minimum to be 0. You press enter, and you see that just gave us a little bit more of this series, a little bit more of the elevation profile to see. I actually like to see the beginning a little bit better. So one way to do that is to go back into your data, and instead of starting at 0 here, you can manually input, let's say 20 meters. So you start 20 meters ahead of, so your start point instead of 0 is at 20. You can see it changes all your other values after that. So when you go back and look at your profile, you're no longer starting right at 0, you're starting at 20. So that sounds great. Another thing you might want to do is you can change your units down here to make it a little bit bigger. So if you click on the axis again, right click it, say format the axis. You can change your units to, let's just show you, 10. You can see how these numbers are real scrunched up here. That's probably a little too close. You can try 25. I think that looks pretty good. The other thing is there's a decimal. It says, instead of saying 200, it says 200.0. Takes up a little extra space. So if you scroll down here, you can edit your number format. And here's your decimal places. Change it from 1 to 0. You see that? Over here it shrinks the 200. Instead of saying 200.0 to just saying 200. So watch this number as I change this to 2. Makes it a lot bigger. So it's just taking up unnecessary space. So I'm going to change that to 0. Next thing, you can change this axis a little bit too. So if you right click on that, you say format axis, you're already in there. You can change your minimum. See the lowest we go here is about 25. So let's see, you might be able to see this profile a little better if you change this to 25. Press enter. Let's change it to 20. There we go. So now your elevation profile is sitting really nice in the middle of your graph. You can get a good idea of what that is. So the next thing we want to do here, let's exit out of this format, give us a little bit more space. I'm going to zoom out here. You click here, you don't click, if you click in the center of the graph, that's not what you want. You click out here on the border, highlights the whole thing. I want to do this same graph, but I want to do it for the distribution side. So you right click, you say copy, click a cell over here, and then you click paste. Alright, so let's edit the title. If you just click in here, change this to distribution side. Click in the center of the graph, right click, go to select data. What you do is click on this series and you press edit. So now we want to make sure we're drawing from the right spreadsheet. Let's go ahead and first create our GPS and then we'll create our Abney series. So I'm okay with that. It says GPS, looks good. Now we go down to the X values, click there. This is the supply tab. We want to be in distribution. So I'm going to drag this whole column. This is cumulative distance in meters. Press enter. Distribution tab. Since this is the GPS, we're going to pull the GPS elevations. Press enter. Alright. Press OK. Now this is a little bit muddled here. It's kind of hard to see what's going on, so I'm going to zoom in on it. See, this axis is really hard to tell what's going on, so I think the first thing I want to do is edit this axis and this one. So in order to know how to define your axis, let's see the elevations that we're working with. So our elevations go all the way from 6 to 71. So let's define that here. Click on your axis and right click. And you say format. So since we're all the way down to 6, let's just make it 0. And then 80, that's enough to cover. We only go up to 71, so I think that's enough to cover it. Now if you remember what I did last time, I'm going to exit out of this. If you remember what I did last time, I wanted to see the beginning of the curve here, which is butted up against the 0. I want to give it a little bit of a cushion. So the start, I'm going to make it 20 meters rather than, if you watch over here, these values are all going to change when I press enter. So now we can actually see the beginning. The other thing I want to edit is this axis. It's a little too squished up here, so format the axis. Let's change our units to 100 meters. And that's a little bit easier to read now. The next thing we can do here is add our Abney series so we can compare the two. Click in the center, right click, select data. We're going to add a series. I'm going to call this one Abney. This is the X values. Same exact X values. Even though the your Abney survey uses trigonometry to calculate your elevation relative to sea level, it uses your GPS points to calculate your X and Y, your distances. So you still use the same cumulative distance. The Y values, or the elevation, is where you use a different one than GPS. So let's fill those out. We're going to grab these off of your Abney data. Press enter. See what it gives us. So this is good news. The two series are pretty similar. You can see they both have a local high point here, and then they dip back down and they come back up. This is where they kind of disagree. There's that error that we saw down here, 6.7 meters. That right there is a difference of 6.7 meters. So what I like to do from here is use this to put it in a report to show whoever's looking at it a 2-scale version of your horizontal distance versus your elevation. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Save it into my documents as Abney design sheet with today's date. The other thing you should do is always save your GPS points. GPS points 8 because you might need those in the future. Alright, so one thing I like to do to make this a little bit easier to manipulate is I like to copy and paste it into Microsoft PowerPoint. So if you click out, you don't click here in the center, you don't click there, you click right here on the edge, then you right click and you say copy. So we just save this, but before I copy it, I want to actually get rid of, I want to use for my figure, I want to get rid of one of these series, and I think that trust what Aristeel measured in the field a little bit more than what the GPS measured, because that thing's a little more subject to error. So if I click on this series, and I right click it and say delete, it's now gone, and then I can copy this whole chart. Go to PowerPoint. So delete those, we don't want those in the background. And if you just right click here and say paste, this is where we're going to start manipulating this a little bit, making it look like have different components. So let's go ahead and put in some of the different components. At the high point, we're going to have the reservoir. And the low point is the center of town. So let's put those in here. If you go to insert, then you go to shapes, you can put in a reservoir up here, right there. You can change its outline to black so it stands out a little bit more. And then if you insert shapes again, go select a star down here, put that at the center of town. Change your color, change your outline, and there you go. So in the next video I'll show you how to change these graphs around, these elevation profiles, and put them together so you can get a good picture of the supply side and the distribution side as they relate together.